Hello, my name is Yokai Tarubinga. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Active Horizons. Active Horizons is a youth-led organization set up to support young people in the community. Today, I'm excited to present to you our documentary film to showcase Windrush and its legacy, put together by young people as well as the elders in our community. This documentary has been made in partnership with Active Horizons, Bexley African Caribbean Association, and the Bexley Wellbeing Partnership. Thank you.
Hello, I am Toka and a youth worker at Active Horizons.
Hi, my name is Charlize and I'm a youth worker here at Active Horizons.
In order to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Windrush Generation arriving in Britain, the young people of Active Horizons
have been interviewing the elders and basically gaining more insight to the Windrush scandal
as well as their personal lives.
However, before we get to the questions, we must first understand the Windrush history and the people behind it.
People arriving in the UK between 1948 and 1973 from Caribbean countries are what we call the Windrush Generation.
Now, the name Windrush derives from the HMT Empire Windrush ship that transported the first large group of Caribbean people to the UK.
Children from this young age were left to build this legacy from scratch.
The Windrush Generation primarily consisted of individuals from British colonies in the Caribbean,
particularly Jamaica, Trinidad, and many other islands. They were encouraged to come to the UK to help rebuild the country after World War II.
They mostly filled labor shortages in sectors such as transport, other services, most importantly, the NHS.
Those who arrived were free to live and work in the UK because they were considered British subjects. They were from countries under British colonial rule.
This was made possible under the British Nationality Act passed in 1948.
The people who arrived were faced with various challenges upon their arrival,
including
discrimination,
racism,
and difficulties in finding housing
and employment.
In 1971, there was a change in UK immigration law, which resulted in many individuals from the Windrush Generation being classified as illegal immigrants,
as if they didn't have the necessary documents to prove their status.
To maintain the legacy of the Windrush, important figures like Samuel King and Arthur Torrington formed the Windrush Foundation in 1995. The Windrush Foundation was the first charity whose mission was to keep alive the memories of the first wave of Black and brown post-war settlers in England.
This issue came to public attention in 2018 when it was revealed that some members were wrongfully detained, denied healthcare, and threatened deportation due to the lack of documents.
Imagine being removed from your comfortable living situation and being taken to a foreign land where you're taken away from your family and friends, as well as the only place you've ever been able to call home.
This is simply an injustice.
The mistreatment of the Windrush Generation was unveiled through the Windrush scandal, which sparked an outcry with calls for compensation and changes in immigration policies.
This led to an apology from the UK government, who then established the Windrush Compensation Scheme to provide financial help to those affected.
The scandal, however, is far from over, as there have been people who have been affected by the scandal that have yet to get any justice. The injustice and hardship that the Windrush Generation have faced still has an effect today, especially on the elders we'll be interviewing.
However, it is clear that a lot of people from the generation look to the future and legacy of the Windrush and wish to move on from the painful events of the past.
Overall, the Windrush Generation played a significant role in shaping post-war Britain,
contributing to its cultural diversity, labor force, and social fabric. They are recognized for their resilience,
perseverance,
and enduring contributions to British society.
When did you arrive in the UK and what was it like? That's a very important question. I arrived in the UK March the 11th, 1965. And I was 19 years old when I came to England. I came because I wanted, my brother was here, and my mom think coming to UK would be better for me. So that's how I arrived. I came on plane, I didn't come on the ship.
I was at that point living with my grandparents because my parents had come on over into the UK in advance, a good few years in advance. So I was living with my grandparents.
I came here in 1961, 10th of October 1961. I was around 9-10 years old at that time.
So you was a youth?
So I was a youth, yes.
Oh, you're from the Caribbean, right?
No, I'm not.
Oh, where are you from?
I'm from Sheffield,
Okay.
South Yorkshire. I'm the first generation of children that were born in the UK from parents of the Windrush generation.
Yeah, well, John left Jamaica 23rd of April 1960. It was a Saturday evening. We sailed out from Jamaica. Didn't know where I was going. Didn't feel any way at all. Just happy to be around.
Yeah.
And we had a good trip, you know, because we didn't have any. It was like sitting in this room here. A lot of people told us that sometimes your food fell off the table all over the place. The ships going, you know, when we got bad weather, we have good weather all the way, you know. So we stopped one place. We came on a ship called, for example, the journey was called Boat Trip to London. That we came on a boat, we go on a train, and another ferry.
How did you feel when you first entered the UK? Was it what you expected? Did you still get treated differently by others?
Okay. When I first came to the UK, it was very difficult to imagine what it would be like, because in Jamaica, all I could remember is people saying the streets of England were paved with gold. And there's no such thing.
We get onto a ferry. There was 1,200 of us. The ship owner was saying he didn't expect so many people. So anyway, we get onto it, and I fell asleep. I woke up in the morning next day, the Southampton. Yeah. So when it came out, and go through immigration and all those things, we had to wait on a train. And I looked up and I see a motor car, a bus. It was a double-decker bus. It looked strange to me. I said, oh, they got two buses, and they were different from now. Everything wasn't in one. The driver had a special cabin on his own. Nobody talked to him or anything like that. But like now, we can talk to the driver while they're going along. Get on this train to Victoria. Some social worker came on to the train and give us a book. I don't know where that is now. And it told us how to get around and where we're going and what to take, you know.
Tell us about the impacts in the construction of the railway lines and technologies that helped the British economy rise after the war.
As time developed, they started to use
electric trains?
Electric trains. Electric trains now are faster than the previous trains they had before. So they had to develop lines tracks in order for these trains to run, okay? But it wasn't just the technology. They needed people to actually run the lines, okay? They needed people to work on the lines at nights. They needed people in the day to work, for cleaning the trains, for driving the trains, and all the other things associated with the railway and other transport system in this country.
The reason why I came to the UK, I kind of rewind a bit. I was brought up in a family of 6 siblings, and my eldest sibling came to England about 2 years before I arrived. And from the letters he was sending back home, it seems quite an exciting place.
And they didn't have the workforce after the war, so they went out and actively recruited people from the Caribbean. They're now called the Windrush Generation, to come to Britain to actually run the services. So they came here to run the railway, to run the bus systems, and a lot of them to work in the health service.
So when I came, it was just normal houses, and similar to what Grace had said, I came 2 years after her in the March. It was very bleak, and I was not too happy because I came from sunny Jamaica to this bleak scenario.
When did you arrive in the UK and what was it like?
I came on a plane, I didn't come on the ship. I was met at the airport by my brother and my sister-in-law, and I was quite taken aback by the buildings with all these smoke coming out of the building. So I thought they were all factories. But little did I know that they were houses, because in those days they had coal fire. So that's when I saw the smoke, that was the coal smoke coming out from the chimney in the houses. So yes, so that was my first experience, and it was extremely cold. But I spent about 3 weeks with my brother in a place called New Cross. Then I went into training school to be trained as a nurse at a place called Watford in Hertfordshire. So that was it. It was all strange, but for me it was quite exciting because I wanted to kind of experience what it was like away from home and see other people and see places.
What was it like back home, and what made you want to come to the UK?
Okay, that's an interesting question to ask. I had a very strict upbringing, and my mom didn't want me to have a relationship with a nice young man who I thought I was in love with. And I got the opportunity to go to the local university in Jamaica, which was the hospital, University of Jamaica. And when I said to my mother, yes, I'd go, she said, no, you're not going to stay in Jamaica, you're going to England. She didn't want me to have a relationship with this young man who went into the police force. And I think for me, being 18 going 19, I thought, no, I want my freedom. So I was kind of glad when she said, you're going to England. So for me, it was exciting to kind of get away from this restricted type of environment. But at the same time, I suppose like any teenager, you want to go to the wide world and explore, and you think everything is going to be hunky-dory, but it wasn't.
Did you live in Jamaica? Was it country? Was it town? How was life then?
So I come from a very small farming community. My mother came here in 1956, and I was left and raised by my grandmother. So my sister and myself was raised by my grandmother, and we lived on a farm, big area, and she had to do all the farming. Herself, yes?
I was living with my grandparents, and they have a vast set of lands, different patches of land all over. He had to do all the farming, and we obviously helped him along there. We took foods to market like sugarcane and oranges. We had a lot of oranges, and took those to market to make money to live. Just local, just a local country girl.
We had a mule, it was called tar mule. And that tar mule is what she used to bring all the provisions that she grew to market. And when she went to market, my grandmother had to carry my sister in her arm and me on her back. And then she has to walk about 5 miles to reach my auntie.
My mother passed away when I was quite young, so my dad brought me and my brother up. My dad went to school at the local primary school, and from primary school to secondary school, they were all taught in one school and would have to walk miles to go to school and then miles to come back. But in the morning, they'd have to move a donkey, tether and do chores before they actually went to school. And then when they came home, they would do the same again. Yeah. So, you know, he would always say, you have it so easy in England, you don't have to do so much work. Whereas when I was in Jamaica, and he would tell us about his life and what sort of things, you know, he used to do. Things like my dad could clean a house from top to bottom.
Clean man.
Yes. And when I say clean, he would be able to sweep, scrub, clean fish, fry fish. Also, you know, he was a very all-round.
But the funny bit about it, even though I wanted that freedom, when I came to England, and there was opportunities when I could say, okay, well, that's, you know, we were in the nursing quarters, and if we wanted to go out, say like down to the cinema, we had to get permission from the matron to go to the cinema, and there was a time you had to come back. The gates would be locked and you couldn't come in. So gosh, that wasn't what I expected, but I adapted.
He used to sing in the clubs.
Was a musician?
He was a singer. He used to sing like Nat King Cole.
Oh, okay.
So he used to do that on the side to earn money. There used to be a saying: no coloureds, no Irish, no dogs. And what he used to say was they used to have rent a room, and it was maybe 10 people that would sleep in this one room. Yeah, and they'd take it in turns. They'd have like a day job, and so the night duty would come on, and the morning, and then they rotate. Yeah. And so they used to have partners. I don't know, it's where they weren't able to actually, people from the Caribbean weren't able to actually have a bank account. So what they would do is they would club together and then have a partner. So that each week they'd throw a hand, so it may be a £10 each week, and then after, say, maybe there may be 10 people in the partner, and then each person would have that hand.
And then repeat it until everybody else.
And so everybody would have.
Right.
And
so
that's how
they create their own banking system.
Exactly.
So this was only because
they weren't able to get a bank
is it because
account?
they were not allowed? Or because
well,
they
it was
able
difficult. It was difficult to actually get a bank account because you weren't seen as
part of the society.
Yes, and
although even they said when the people came from the Caribbean, they came as British people.
Exactly.
And then didn't have the same opportunity to have a bank account, whereas those who were called out to come into work, where were they going to put their money?
Exactly. So it was like deposits for houses.
Houses, yeah.
And so you weren't able to go to a bank and say, look, I'd like to open a bank account to get a deposit to buy a house.
Wow.
So then partners were set up in the groups. Maybe you'd have somebody that would be in the train service or buses, on the buses, or nurses, and then they form their own little group and then start up their partners.
How have you managed to deal with cultural differences with your children born in the UK, as they have no first experience of growing up in the Caribbean?
Okay, thanks for that question. Let me just say that the Caribbean was a British colony. So a lot of what's in the Caribbean is actually here. Our weddings are the same. The school systems basically are the same. The games we play are the same, but we played more cricket than we played football. So when I came here, the cultural differences were really one of pronunciation in terms of language. The foods were the main differences, okay? But the schools were very, very similar. The only problem was at school, they think that most black people were more athletic than they were academic. So a lot of us were put into running. So on sports day, for instance, a lot of us was put into running. We had football. So for instance, my son, they love playing football like you do, I suppose. What problems they have is in terms of when they see managers, okay? So if it's football team, they love football, they want to go and support it. And when I came here, it was just John Barnes. You know John Barnes?
No.
It was just John Barnes who was in the football team as a main black person in football. And all the children wanted to play football. Because in the Caribbean, the main games were cricket. And when we came here, there was not a lot in terms of cricket in the schools, but there was football. But the problem for us was when we look around, all the managers of football clubs were white.
Yeah, I remember. Now, I remember John Barnes.
You remember John Barnes?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. And that was a great thing for us to look at TV to say there's a black player there, and John Barnes was the person for that, okay? In terms of cultural differences, we like eating yam, banana, and all those sorts of things that were present in the Caribbean. But our children preferred fish and chips. You like fish and chips?
No.
You don't like fish and chips?
I just like the chips.
You just like the chips?
I just like chicken and chips.
You like chicken and chips? Okay, we had some problems as well in terms of ham, because some of our Caribbean people don't eat pork, so they won't have ham, but they'll have beef or lamb. Okay, so there's a difference there. When I was at school, we used to have something called spam. It's horrible. There's all bits of pork in there. And some of us weren't allowed to eat it, some of it because maybe of religion. Okay, but everybody will have chips.
I heard of spam.
You heard of spam?
Yeah.
Okay, but it was chips for us, a lot of people. Fish and chips was the order of the day, okay? And for instance, cultural difference, nearly every child, including myself, we love custard and we love apple pies. Do you love custard and apple pies?
No, I don't like apple pie.
You don't like apple?
But I like custard on my cake sometimes.
You like custard on your cakes?
Yeah.
Do you consider yourself British or do you consider yourself Jamaican?
I think of myself as first British, but with Caribbean or Jamaican background, because from a very early age, from the age of 5, I was writing to my grandparents, my aunties in Jamaica, and they would always tell me about, my parents would always tell me about things that was going on in Jamaica when they were there as youngsters.
Okay.
And so I've always been attuned to the Jamaican heritage. So, but I was born in Sheffield, where again it was a different culture to my parents, to my dad's culture. So it was a bit mixture of the two. So it was Yorkshire. Well, I had a Yorkshire accent, so I was having a Yorkshire twang, and then I could mix it with the Jamaican patois. So it was a mixture of the two. So yeah, for me, it's always been my heritage of food, eating Caribbean, rice and peas on a Sunday, coleslaw, apple juice, pineapple juice, carrot juice, and then having fish and chips. So it's so again, it's a mixture.
So there's a mixture of two cultures here.
How was education different when you got here?
It was a lot different. There was much more freedom here for me to talk to teachers than it was in the Caribbean. In the Caribbean, it's yes sir, no sir. And here, there was much more freedom to talk to teachers, okay? I could say things, for instance, all my family, everybody is big. You have to say Mr., or you'd have to, close family friend, you'd have to call them auntie or uncles. But it is different here. It was very different, and I found it very difficult. So when I went to school, I was very quiet. I didn't ask questions. I'm a typical chatterbox, but I didn't ask much questions because I wanted to spend time to try and find out, orientate myself as to where I was, okay? But it was easier here to ask questions, okay? But what I found when I went to school was, for some reason, the teachers thought that I'd be better at playing cricket or football or do cross-country racing, to be more of an athlete than to be somebody who liked physics and chemistry and maths and biology and things like that, okay? So those were the sort of main differences at school. And when I went to school, because I was a chatterbox, okay? And I wasn't afraid. So in the Caribbean, you're taught to be afraid of anybody who's older than you. So I was afraid of policemen, I was afraid of teachers, I was afraid of preachers, I was afraid of answering back to anybody. But I found here I could actually express myself more. The main difference, as I said, was because I think because of my color was a problem, okay? Because I wasn't as assimilated in the system. For instance, when I went to school, I would hear, you would say lorry for a big truck. I would say truck, because coming from the Caribbean, we our English was a mixture of English, because it's English. We have a broken language which we call patois in the Caribbean. But essentially, when we go to school, it's all English. But it's also mixed because we're close to America with American slang.
Did you still get treated differently by others?
Yes, you do notice, especially when I went to college, there were only few black students, and we tend to huddle together more than mixing with the white people. We tend to keep ourselves together for support. The treatment that I had, to be honest, I can't say it was bad, because you get a little differences. You get picked on a little bit more, but if you don't react, then they just leave you alone, to be honest, when you're not interested. So from my experience, I had a reasonably comfortable time. So yeah, that was good. I had no bother, so to speak.
I'll give you one example of my time in nursing. We were in the school, and what is called practical work. And because we were new to the country, they said, oh, there's certain things we need to eat. So the house mistress came in and said, oh, we're having Welsh rabbit for supper. So I got quite excited. I thought, rabbit for supper. And when I went into the dining room, it was cheese and toast.
For support, we tend to look to each other for support, because we recognize our own kin, and you form a relationship with your teachers who are white, and there were other students who are white, but you tend to have a more comfortable relationship with another black person, and that's what I thought, like huddled together. In a sense, we have lunch together. When we get in the classroom, we sit together just for that support, because you're in somewhere different. And also the language, the way we pronounced words, some words were different to how it was pronounced here. And I remember one of my colleagues saying to me, oh, the street that the college was on, which is Westminster College, it was called Kingsway then, Kingsway Westminster. The street was Sidmouth Street. But having come from Jamaica as a freshman, I call it Sidmouth Street. And she sort of said to me, oh, Monica, it's not pronounced Sidmouth, it's pronounced Sidmouth. So little things like that, they help to get me through little things like that. Yes.
How long have you been living in the UK, and did you like coming here?
I've been living in the UK since March 1967. I think that's about, 56 years? Did I get that right? Anyway, since 1967. Basically, following on to that, if I liked coming here, yes, I did. Yeah, by comparison to the life which I would have led in Jamaica to the one that I have led here, I preferred being here because the opportunities that are available here are much more than in Jamaica. We still have a good education system in Jamaica, but here it's definitely a wider range of things for youngsters who want to study in whatever field they want to do, they want to go. I left the college that I attended. When I came up, my parents got me straight into a college because I was 16 and a half. And I managed to get 4 O-levels. But by that time I was 19 and I wanted to work. So I started to work for British Telecom, which was then the post office. And basically after that my life changed. I had my family and then still carried on with a bit of studying to get my accountancy exam, and ended up being an accountant, an internal accountant for a company for several years. So to be honest, I don't think if I had stayed in Jamaica I would have achieved so much. And sometimes I dread to think what would happen, to be honest. But yes, I'm glad I'm here. Does that cover it?
But there were challenges along the way. One of the challenges I faced, which I didn't mention before, before I came to England, one of my cousins was in nursing, so she was the one kind of encouraged me to come into nursing. So she sent me some magazines in Jamaica, so I applied to a hospital to do my training. When I came up, just before I arrived, they informed me that I had to do an exam because my qualification in Jamaica that I acquired in Jamaica, although it was recognized in England, they didn't think I had the grades. So I had to do a test, what they call it. So I had to do a test. And I think the funny bit about doing the test, that there was, I think, about 10 of us from different countries. Some from Africa, there was Western Barbadian, I think there was a Chinese girl, an Irish girl. So we all were there doing the test. And I was informed by my brother, he rang about 12 o'clock in the day when I was doing the test. And the senior person, or the house manager, informed him that, oh no, she was unsuccessful with this examination she was doing. And I thought, okay. So when I came out, my brother came to pick me up and he said, oh, so you didn't do well in your exams. I said, how did you know? He said, I was informed. I said, but I've just come out of the examination room. How could you have been informed? And they informed him when I was still doing the test. So for me, that was the first experience of injustice or inequality. Because at that time, they wanted nurses, especially from people coming up from the Caribbean, even African countries, to do what is called enrolled nurse training. In those days, they had 2 different aspects of nurse training. You had one you could do for 3 years, and that was called general nursing qualification. And there was one you did for 2 years, and that was for 2 years course called an SEN, so a state enrolled nurse. So they were pushing the Caribbean nurses or Caribbean candidates to do the 2-year course. So I refused. I said, no, I'm not doing it. So, and I said, my brother said, if you don't do it, then you want to go back to Jamaica. So the choice was either staying in England, but I didn't do it. In the end, I managed to get another hospital, did the same test, and passed with flying colours. Yes. Yeah.
What's your third question? Is it on hold? Is that possible, Charlie? How have you managed to deal with cultural differences in the UK since your children haven't experienced life in the Caribbean?
Right, well, being one of the children that was born actually in this country, and born up north in Sheffield, it was quite a different way of living, because my dad that brought me up north, he would always be telling me things about Jamaica and how they lived, and I'd be saying, oh well, it's different here now, you can't do this and you can't do that. And he would the things that he would sort of say would no, you must come home after school and not be talking to any strangers and all those sorts of things. And I'd be saying, well, why not? Why can't I talk to my friends and go to my friend's house after school? And he'd be saying things like, come home straight from school, no loitering. And I'd be saying, well, why can't I go off and play with my friends or go to my friend's house? And he would say, no, he doesn't know them. He wants to know what I'm up to, and I have to learn my ABCs and my maths, my times table. So he was very, very much into education. So I think to appease me, he would say, well, bring your friends over to the house and let me see who they are. And then so I'd know what was going on. So that was the sort of things that was different, you know. He would always say that he saw children that were answering their parents back and being rude to them. And he would never allow that for us. That was my brother and myself.
As of today, how do you see the Windrush legacy in the UK?
I think, for me personally, it's actually paved the way for myself and youngsters coming up to actually be able to be aware of their history and their background. A lot of youngsters today will now be able to ask the questions that I, as a youngster, wasn't able to ask. What the school did was it didn't accept that we were all different, and we were able and we were quite capable as youngsters to actually academically do the work. So that they would say to us, would you like to go and sweep the road as a job? And, you know, we would say, well, no, I wanted to be a teacher. And they were saying, oh, well, you don't have the academic knowledge for that. You're not going to be able to do that. Are you sure you're going to pass the exams? And I would say, well, yes. And they'd say, oh, well, we'll not let you have you'll not do the exams now. You can do them later. And I'd be saying, well, no. And I told my dad this, and my dad was sort of typical West Indian. What? What? No. And so he went to the school and actually said to the teacher, look, you know, this is what I want my daughter to do. And, you know, if she's not bright enough, then that's it. But I think it was it was definitely a black and a white thing where the black children were not bright enough to go on and be academically responsive, you know. So that was what it was, really, basically.
How did you get by in the Windrush? What was your biggest challenge?
Okay. When I came over in 1965, I think things were a little bit better in England than those who came over in 1948, because I think people were more accepting of having what we would call ourselves foreigners or black people in England. So things are a lot better. I think for me, because I went straight into training, I wasn't exposed to some of the issues that people who didn't go into a structured environment. So I find things were quite easy for me. So I didn't have much challenges as those who are outside, because I had everything provided for me. So accommodation and so forth. And I suppose I was rather sheltered about some of the things that was happening in the wider community. But even in the nursing home or the training school, because we had people from different parts of the world, we had to learn. We were living in a big house. We had to share a room. There were 3 of us in a room, different culture. So we had to learn to live with each other. So for me, that was quite a bit of a challenge. And then somebody would say, I don't like what you're doing. And then you have to make sure when bedtime, all lights have to be turned off. So whether you want to go to sleep or not, you had to stay, because that was the structure. So I went into what I call a structured environment.
Tell us a bit more of the importance of Windrush Foundation and Sam King's work.
Thank you for asking me the question. Sam King came on the Windrush ship from the Caribbean. He was born in Jamaica, and he answered the call to come to England to help to rebuild the country. That's after war. Yes, he traveled on the ship from Jamaica in 1948. And on that ship, he had another companion called Arthur Torrington. And when they came to England, they had various experiences. They had difficulty trying to find accommodation, and there's a lot of difficulty they experienced. So they wanted to preserve that experience. So they came together and thought, how can we make sure that other people can be aware of some of the difficulties they experience coming to England? So they formed what is called now the Windrush Foundation. And that was set up in 1976.
Do you think your life would have been better if you stayed back in the Caribbean?
The answer to that, first off, is no. My mother was already here when I came up from Jamaica to the UK in March 1967. At that time, I was about 16 and a half years old. So I went straight to college. If I was in Jamaica, I would have, I'm not so sure how far I would have gone into the education system, but I was already studying in Jamaica, but I didn't get very far. But I think on comparison between life as I know people, some people live in Jamaica, which I would have lived a similar life. Comparing that to my life in the UK, my life here is much better in terms of my education. I was able to go to college, and I think I came away with 4 O-levels. And after that, by about 19, I wanted to work, and I joined British Telecommunications. Then it was called the Post Office, and it was a very good job, and that enabled me to accomplish a lot of things. Now, if I was in Jamaica at that time, I wouldn't have been so advanced in my life. It's a little bit, because I haven't lived it, it's totally different. You just have to imagine what it would be like then. But I prefer my life here.
From your time being a UK resident and being born here, have you been to Jamaica?
Oh yes, several times.
Okay, so-
Several times, and I've taken my children.
Oh, you've taken your
because-
children?
Yeah, because again, I want them to experience their history.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing better than going back, I say going back, like I was born there, but to go to Jamaica as it's their history, it's their heritage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to understand the politics, the culture
Yeah.
of
The values.
Yeah, the
of life,
values,
the
yes.
entertainment,
just
the food.
so that they can understand that this is where they came from, their family came from,
Yeah.
their whole life.
The existence
Yeah.
started from there.
And these were invited by the British to come here. And actual fact, when they came here on passport that was British passport, okay? But later on the system changed, so they had to, their status change. And a lot of them, like myself, who came here very early, had to go and get a bit of paper to say, I'm a British citizen, but I came here as a British citizen. Okay.
Okay.
Did that help?
Yes, that helped
Thanks
very
very
much.
much. Okay.